Here's where we left things last time, more or less. We've got a simple grid-based layout, which is responsive. It's going from a single column here to on a small screen, so that's the default layout. And on a wider screen, it's going to 2 columns. And we made that go to 2 columns side by side using CSS Grid in combination with media queries. So just a little recap on that. To come back to our HTML, we've got an article here, which has a CSS class of content-main. So the article starts here, finishes down here, and after that, in the HTML, we have an aside, which has this class content-aside given to it. All right. So, and we wrapped all of that inside another div, inside a div element, again with the class that we just called layout-grid. Okay. So I say it's wrapped in that div element because it starts here and then finishes down here. Okay, and the other thing is that we put in a little HTML comment. Looks like this. That's just a little reminder to us that layout-grid class, or the div with that layout-grid class ends there. When you start to build more complex layouts like we do in second year, then you can wind up with actually a lot of divs all over the place, and you really want to keep track of which div is which. Okay, div just meaning essentially a division in the page. It's not semantic HTML. Unlike article and aside, those are semantic HTML. That is, that the element itself, the name of the element itself, carries meaning. Okay. So let's play with this a little bit more. Let's say we wanted to add a little footer. Let's come back to the view in my browser here. Let's say we, at the bottom of the page, we wanted to add a little footer in here that spans across those 2 columns on a wider view, and on a narrow viewport such as a phone, just nicely sits down at the bottom of that one column there. All right. So the question is, how do we do that? So let's go back to our HTML. All right. We still want it to be part of the grid, I think, in this instance. Maybe there are situations in which you're going to want your footer to be independent, but let's have a look at this. It could, for that matter, be any sort of element that sort of you want spanning those 2 or more columns that you have on wider viewports. All right, so let's put in the footer element. Again, this is a bit of semantic HTML. I'm going to give this a class name footer-primary. I don't know why you would have more than one footer, but in principle, I suppose you could. Probably not great practice, though, to do that. Anyway, I'll put a little heading in here. H2, this is footer. A little bit of paragraph text. This is the end of the page. Now, on a real website, of course, you would put useful things in there. You might have a whole lot of, almost like a directory of links to pages or sections of interest across the site. It might even function a little bit like a site map showing the whole thing. Or there might be various other things. Annoyingly, of course, and a lot of modern websites will put things like third-party ads or things like that in there, which, well, let's not comment on that. All right, so I'm going to style that up. So I'm going to copy that class name I just gave that footer element there, and I'm going to go back over to our styles.css here. And again, remember this, our default styles are for small viewports. So this is mobile first design. Okay, so I'm going to start it up just using that class name there. And I'm going to do something like, I will give it a background color just so we can see that. I might actually give it, what will I give it? Actually, I might just use this little color chip here. If I just click on that, let's give it a sort of a nice cheery yellow kind of color there. All right. Again, this is really more for the sake of visibility than anything else. All right. Now, as in terms of visual design, graphic design, no, this is not amazing stuff that we have so far by any stretch. All right, but it is good for showing the techniques. Okay, so we've given it 1 rem of padding. Okay, now let's have a look at this. So if I just come back here to a narrow viewport, make my browser window narrow, and I hit Command R, you can see there's our footer down there, as you'd expect. All right, so that seems fine. It's using that gap element, that grid gap element there to space those out. But what happens is we make it wider. All right, if we scroll down, okay, you can see that this footer element here is only spanning, it's only going across 1 column, whereas we really want it to span 2. So let's come back to our code here. All right, so what we need to do, all we need to do is to take this class name and pop it down into this area under the media query. So for this first breakpoint that we've got, and I'm going to modify that. And here I'm going to use a property we haven't seen yet. That's grid column. And the value I'm after is this one, span. So this value, you pop a little number after it, and that tells it how many columns you want that to span. This is shorthand for another way we could define things, but I think this is actually an easier way to start. Okay, we can also define it in such ways to have a starting column and a finishing column, working off the various edges in our browser, or the edges in our columns rather. We could think of that as being line 1, line 2, line 3. But I think this is a nice, easy way to start. So let's work on that. So if I hit reload, or Command R, you can see that is indeed spanning 2 columns. All right, so that's pretty tidy. And of course, it's still doing what we want on the narrow viewport, still sitting there nicely just in 1 column, and on the wider viewport, spanning 2 columns. So again, to come back here, that column spanning behavior is only under the media query, and the property is grid-column. And given it this value, span 2. Not the only way to do it. There are a couple of other ways, but this is a good, simple, very straightforward way to make part of your grid span multiple columns there.